You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
Well, week 6 in the Canadian Football League is in the books, and yeah, what a week it was. But I think what's crazier is what has happened after week 6. The Edmonton Elks have lost their third straight walk-off loss against the Ottawa REDBLACKS, and they just continue to find new ways to lose. The Ottawa REDBLACKS winning 37-34, and the big news Monday morning, or afternoon I guess, is that head coach and general manager Chris Jones has been relieved of his duties, coming in to, I guess, take over his multiple hats. G. Roy Simon is going to be the interim general manager, while Jarius Jackson is going to be the interim head coach as they head to Ottawa on Friday for the back half of this home and home. Superfan Mike with the Turf District podcast is here to try to unpack all of this, wasting no time, Superfan. It's good to see your face. I gotta ask you, was this a bit shocking Monday afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it would happen with so many reasons, the short turnaround being like one of the key ones. I mean, we're talking 4 days from today, they're going to be in Ottawa playing the game, the rematch. I mean, we're talking practice starts tomorrow. It's going to be super interesting to see how that sort of runs out. The other thing, of course, is the fact that there's an operations cap. So when you have a head coach who signed for 4 years, and then 2.5 years into that, you let him go. You start wondering, how is this going to work? But Farhan Lalji reported on Twitter not too long ago, and other people have confirmed it, that the contract Jones had signed allows, if he was let go, that it's only for a 12-month severance. So that means we're only looking at 5/18ths of a salary for next year. So about 27% if it's a single year. You got to think they're going to give him a couple, maybe 3 years, and sort of mitigate that over a period. So, yeah, still a shock. I didn't think it was going to happen for the reasons we just said, but you can't say it's not without reason.
Yeah, 8-33 over his tenure, his second stint back with Edmonton, of course, winning the Grey Cup in 2015, but he was not general manager at that time. Correct. This time, he was given the keys to the city, the keys to the organization, and it just hasn't worked. I mean, what sums up this tenure? Is there a word? I don't know if there is.
I don't know. It's just, to me, it's like did not live up to expectations. I'm sure there's a word for that. There'll be people smarter than me that can give you what that word is, but it's just, I mean, disappointing is probably the word that I'm going to use the most. He came in talking a great game. Obviously, we saw what happened in Saskatchewan when he had all the hats there. The first year, not so great. Second year, started to see a little movement. By third year, we were starting to see it turn around. And even after he left, so early in that last season, they had a great year. So it was something that people still had hope for, but it doesn't seem like it worked out. Whether it was the player personnel side, whether it was the schemes, maybe it was a combination of all of those things. But for whatever it is, it's not going to be looked at in history as one of the more successful runs as a coach.
Yeah. So now that he's gone, what do you think is actually going to be possible for changes? Like we know that Jason Shivers has been a Chris Jones guy his entire career as a coach. So obviously not a lot's going to change there, but what, like, schematically, player personnel, like, do you think they're going to go to Trey Ford? Like, what do you think is going to happen here in the short term?
I don't think anything's going to happen in the very short term. I mean, I could be wrong, but with such a short turnaround for that next game, you have to think they're going to have to go with the status quo. They had plans, not just for the game last night, but for the game last night and the rematch, because it's the same team. But anything can happen, right? Jarius Jackson, when he came in, replacing McAdoo as the offensive coordinator, also turned over the keys to Trey Ford a year ago. Trey, we were playing Winnipeg. We were leading them quite well when Winnipeg did come back. But after that, we started seeing our first home win, the first win of the season, everything else, and it really entertained the fans. It's going to depend. You're talking about someone who's an interim head coach, so their whole thing is they're building a resume. They don't know that they're going to be the coach next year. They don't know if they're going to be anywhere in the CFL next year, right? So you're not thinking about let's build something for the future like you'd want to see in a head coach and a GM. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but you got to make sure you're making the fans happy and you're getting people there, because the new owner, that's what they're going to care about.
It's kind of
the fans love them.
It's kind of interesting because last year you mentioned the Winnipeg game when Trey Ford comes in. Well, it was Drew Brown that engineered that comeback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Sure
and
did.
Then Sunday, he throws for 480 yards. In Saskatchewan, the Jones problem was that he doesn't have a quarterback. This year, he's got the offense, but the defense has been a major problem. And that has not been a Chris Jones story almost during the entirety of his CFL career.
Yeah, I don't know what the situation is there, because of course he was the defensive coordinator here for the first couple of years. He's always been a defense first guy. And I just don't understand how the pieces didn't fall into place by year 3. It was very tough seeing us get rid of pieces, especially on that defensive line, like AC Leonard and Jake Serezna. We got a great return coming back with Curly Gittens Jr. But I don't know that Canadian receiver is really our problem. We've seen what Herju Mayala has been able to do this season. They're very high on the supplemental draft guy, Zach Morris, so they just got. Andrew from the Turf District and I both watched him in his first practice just over a week ago now. And the guy is massive. He's 6'7". He's got like an 8-foot reach. And just no one could cover him. He's not the fastest guy, but so again, all these Canadian receivers, Gavin Cobb, another guy in his 3rd year, has had some really great catches. So did we really need to go for a Canadian receiver? I don't know that we did. And no one's replacing those sacks that AC Leonard and Jake Serezna got from last year. So what are they going to do there? And to me, that's where the defense is built, is on that defensive line.
And another thing, just the timing, we already kind of mentioned it. I just find it so interesting that, the difference between 0-4 and 0-5, and it's another 3-point loss. I think the 5 losses this year are by a combined 20, which is
20 points.
Crazy. So I don't know. Do you think there is the pending new owner in Edmonton really forced their hand on this, or at least signed off on making this happen now rather than... I still find it a bit weird that it didn't happen during the bye if it was going to happen, you know?
Yeah, I think part of the reason might have been because those losses were to the top 4 teams in the league, right? If you looked at the standings, you had Saskatchewan, Toronto, Montreal, BC. Those were the top 4 teams. So if you're losing to someone and it's going against Ottawa, who was 2-2 at that point, you're talking about, okay, now we're seeing the teams that we should compare well to. And I know it was built up that this was going to be the start of our run. So fans went in expecting that we were going to see, okay, we're going to win this game. We've got a good shot to maybe win in Ottawa. Hamilton's coming after that. Maybe we could be 3-4 by the time we see BC again. Obviously, that did not work out. And I've heard some people say that this is maybe the worst loss this team has had from the fan perspective since maybe since we lost in Winnipeg in 2006 with Milt Stiegel's big return, where we basically had the win in the bag.
Yeah.
And it just because it was so close to the end. And then it just turned around and we're not going to overtime. Fans were kind of looking around like they survived a plane crash and didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I remember even last year, I think the game against Calgary when the Riders took the lead and then Calgary came back in 10 seconds and won the game. So I feel for you, but we didn't lose 3 games in a row. So but so do you think that this was a goodwill move? Not primarily, but do you think this was a goodwill move for the fans? Just to say, listen, we hear you. Because we did hear fire Chris Jones chants in the crowd.
Oh, absolutely. And where we're sitting, we hear a lot of play Trey Ford as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want Trey. There's an old cliche that, people that listen to the fans will be soon sitting with them. So I don't necessarily think that they're going to make that decision based on the fans. But I think with ownership reported to be in place for Edmonton, that they signed off on this deal, or maybe they even precipitated this deal and saying, listen, we need to make this change now. We're seeing the crowds, not great numbers. I mean, we're talking under 20,000 announced attendance at this point for Edmonton, which used to lead the league, and it certainly be in the top three behind Winnipeg and Saskatchewan. These numbers should be alarm bells. So if you're a new owner, you're like, we need to get this thing turned around now. So it's entirely possible that not just signing off, but they were maybe pushing to make this happen.
Listen, I want to be clear. I don't think McLeod Bethel Thompson is the problem.
Nope.
Like the offense has been, they're doing their job.
It's the best of the three phases. We scored 34 points at home and lost. That should not happen.
Yeah, that shouldn't happen to anyone. So,
right.
but although I think everybody was excited to see Trey get training camp and Trey start the season, and I understand that. I do think maybe the leadership that McLeod brings, like you watch him in the post-game interviews, he carries himself like a starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Man, the way he praises the guys that he throws to, the way he takes accountability, it's a hard job to be the starting quarterback, especially when you're 0-5. But did that McLeod Bethel Thompson move in the offseason kind of feel like a Hail Mary for Chris Jones to kind of at least he feels to get some early wins and to extend his contract, like for him to keep a job, Chris Jones himself, and then he makes the Hail Mary, it doesn't pay off, and now he's out. Although, I don't know. 0-5, changes need to happen. Like the old thing, keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity here. But how do you characterize? I think the whole Trey Ford, McLeod Bethel Thompson, Chris Jones dynamic is kind of going to be, I don't know, it almost seems like the beginning of the end. Although if he won, maybe we're talking a little bit different now.
Yeah, we might be talking different, but I mean, let's say that the game instead goes to overtime, Edmonton wins. There's still a lot of ugliness in that last game to sort of dissect. I am a big fan of MBT, how he has led this team. He's a great individual. He's had nothing but time for the fans. When you see him on fan day or after practice, he doesn't leave the field until he signed every autograph, talked to every person. And when you have a leader, you can't really ask for much more than that. And like I said, the offense wasn't the problem. It's the best of the three phases, especially in the last game. I mean, you certainly can't say the special teams was a great success after, missing a field goal, squibbing that kick. Javon Leake has that fumble, and defense, three guys have 65-yard receptions or more on a single play. It's got to be the offense, right? So I just know going into the season, what most of us sort of expected was that we're going to see MBT. He's going to be mentoring Trey Ford, and we'd see Trey coming in on packages, not just gadget stuff, not just going to be, unlike a certain quarterback in Winnipeg, coming in to just do those run plays, right? It's going to be, you don't know what he's going to do. He's going to move the pocket. He's going to throw downfield. He's got an arm, but it just hasn't happened. And I think that's what the fans are probably the most upset about, is that all the marketing has had Trey Ford front and center as the face of this franchise, and we're not seeing him play.
Well, let's talk about just the game. Because, it started off, the Elks putting 15 points on the board. They had a 2-score lead. It sort of melted away, and then they fought back. So, credit to them for not quitting. Like, I don't think that the Elks roll over and quit. Clearly not.
No.
They're losing by, 3 points in absolute heartbreakers. But you mentioned two of them. The highly touted Argos coming over to Edmonton. Javon Leake, Boris Beatty. Leake has a key fumble. And then at the end of the game, where I listened to Chris Jones' post-game scrum. He said the call it's a tie game, 34-34. The call was for Beatty. The biggest lag in the CFL was to boot that ball as far as he can. Hopefully get a single, and if not, Ottawa would have little time to make anything happen. But with Khalil Pimpleton, we saw the speed that he has for the Red Blacks. Having a 29-yard reception with, 5 seconds off the clock.
Right.
For the Elks to allow that is almost the bigger story than I think. Well, there was a lot of factors that went into this loss. I think having 3 100-yard receivers on Ottawa, that's probably the top of the list, other than one little play here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that that's the top 3 or top 5 passing games in the history of the Ottawa franchise going back to the 1800s. That is absolutely insane. 480 yards. And you mentioned before the Winnipeg game last year, in 7 quarters, Drew Brown is over 700 yards passing against Edmonton.
Well, and by the way, Sunday's game, I think, was the anniversary of Matt Dunnigan's 700-yard game against Edmonton in the 90s. So, I don't know. History repeats himself a little bit there.
Yeah, I've talked to a few alumni, and they brought that up as well, that were playing in that game. They said that the most offending DB from that game was given an apple and a roadmap right after the game. In this case, it was the coach.
Little general.
That, yeah. So
I got one other question to ask you. My buddy Matt and I were talking. So, end of the game, they're 3rd and 1 with, I think it was 12 seconds when the play started, when the play is blown in. Why are you not running the clock down to zeros there?
Yeah, that's something I've got in my notes to talk about on our podcast as well. Yeah. It's just the clock management was absolutely abysmal. I understand at this point, you're like, you 2nd down, you'd want to make sure you've got time left. But when it's 3rd down, if you miss it, you turn the ball over anyway. So you've got nothing left to lose. Get zeros on that clock by the time the ball is snapped. Get in the end zone if you can, and then you guarantee it's OT.
Ooh.
I guess that's enough said.
Yeah.
But what a brutal
It's been, it's the last 4 games that have ended with a 3-point loss, right? It's just the last 3 have been the walk-off field goals. And then the first game against Saskatchewan, it's a 2-point converted touchdown, the difference, right? In points. So over 5 games, that's a 4-point loss average. It's been tough.
Well, and Beatty has the missed field goal. That doesn't help. And I actually think that one key moment in the game, like Bethel Thompson was under pressure all game long. And then late in the game, Lorenzo Malden, arguably their best defensive lineman, gets hurt. The most outstanding defensive player a few years ago. The next play, it's a sack. Right. So what's going on? And then I can hear you a few rows behind me. They ran the ball 8 times with Kevin Brown, and he only had 4 catches. I don't think that Kevin Brown got bad overnight, but it's like they got Geno Lewis involved, and the clutch catch. Yeah. Like double coverage, the one-handed catch. Are you kidding me? That
incredible.
That's why 87 gets paid what he does, right?
That's why they brought him on board. And that's what I just didn't understand. And we've talked about this on our show. We have one of the most outstanding players, outstanding receivers in the league. And he's almost being used as the world's most expensive decoy up to this point. He had 1 catch in the first half. He had 1 catch in the 3rd quarter. And then all the rest were in that 4th quarter. And after a while, I started watching him, and I was actually taking pictures of just Geno during every play, and he was wide open for more than half of them. I don't know why he was becoming almost like the 2nd, 3rd, and even 4th read on these snaps. It just seemed a little odd. And BT did address it. He said, he's got to move him up in that ranking because it's just, even if he's being covered, he can come down with those catches. I don't know. It's a different game if all of a sudden Geno's maybe being used more in that first half and we're going into halftime up by 2 scores.
And we had they had opportunities, to put the game away. And then there was a moment where David Foucault ends up, picking up an Ottawa defender and throwing him like 5 yards. So it was like they had this momentum, right? and then take a goofy penalty on a turnover.
On the fumble.
And it felt like that was the massive turning point in the first half. And hey, we got to give credit to Ottawa for doing what they did, obviously. It felt, and I talked to you after the game, like Edmonton had a great handle in the running game. And Raquel Armstead of the Red Blacks has had a good start to the season. He had 2.9 yards a carry. It seemed like Sean Oakman was doing well, limiting the run, although not quite in game shape. I could see him with hands on hips on the sideline a lot. And then Derek Moncrief comes in as a linebacker, and Chris Jones said, hey, those routes where they were getting slammed up the middle weren't his responsibility, so it's not him. And I was it Jackson, the DB for
Cordell Jackson.
I think the Red Blacks found a mismatch there because he was covering Dominic Rhymes much of the night, and that's just not fair. Rhymes has about 4 feet of reach on him. And although, there was that pass interference late in the game that caused the touchdown there. But I mean, Khalil Pimpleton, 4 catches, 153 yards, including that 70-yard reception. That was just a simple route. It's the explosive plays that the defense has been given up. And that's been the theme for them so far in 2024, I think.
Yeah, Andrew refers to them as elk explosions because it's just happened over and over again. They were right down the middle, and our starting safety is Lucius Purefoy, who is an experienced guy at safety, and for whatever reason was taking bad angles or just plain got missed. I mean, you said it before, like we have to give credit to Ottawa. They get paid to play the game too. But they outplayed us in our own barn. And it's one of those things that we can win in Ottawa next week, but it's not the same as winning at home. Like these fans had a great experience with Dino Days. Everyone seemed to be having a good fun at tailgate.
What a great theme, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, even the cheerleaders and the inflatable dinosaur outfits, it was great, and then the dinosaur runs and to come off with that kind of loss just takes out all that momentum you've had. It's just really tough, and making players that I think are good but look like all-stars, world beaters. And I don't know that they are necessarily that good, or we just made them look that good.
And at the end of the game, Dedman ended up getting hurt, so it kind of looked like Edmonton was afraid of him, and then he left the game, and I don't know, that last kick, I'm not convinced that Beattie just botched it. Maybe he was just standing up for his guy, but you're afraid of number 17 who's now on the sideline,
But was Pimpleton back there as the returner?
He was. They didn't kick to him. They kicked to Tobias Harris, I believe.
Yeah.
Who did have a 35-yard punt return himself.
But again, if you're pounding it into the end zone, 35 yards is great, but you're out to the 30.
Exactly.
With, at that point, 5 seconds left, they're probably going to take a knee because you don't want to turn that ball over and give Edmonton a chance. So,
So, Superfan Mike at 56 Parkies on X. The Turf District podcast is out every Tuesday. So I do think you will have something to talk about. It's Tuesday, right?
Yeah, Tuesday night at 8:30 Mountain Time.
All right, live streaming on YouTube. Finally, I do want to ask you, is Chris... I've learned in this league to never say never. And I was so confident in picking all the home teams this week. Only 2 were right. So, like, the CFL is, for 9-team league, you'd think you'd be able to get a handle on it and predict this stuff. Is Chris Jones ever going to be back in the CFL?
I would have said no 3 years ago. And it was just a complete surprise when he came back. And I think the main reason he was favored to come back is because he could do all those roles. He was not only GM and head coach, he was also defense coordinator and president of player personnel. So he could take all those roles because we had so many coaches let go. We still owed Jason Moss for his contract. We still owed Jamie Elizondo for his contract, and Brock Sunderland and Chris Presson as president. So we had limited funds. We needed one person that could do multiple roles. I don't know that his resume is good enough now to withstand what he's had to face the last 2.5 years. So could it happen? Sure. I mean, he was in Toronto as a consultant. But it just was a defensive consultant. His defense has been terrible. So is he better with a GM above him? 100%, I think. So maybe that's his only way back in.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Jones doesn't seem like a guy that will swallow the pride and just be a DC anymore. It seems like every job that he takes is a little bit of a promotion, but now I don't think there's a choice.
No, I mean, I remember, I'm old, so I can remember back in 1989, Edmonton went 16-2. Our defensive coordinator was Don Matthews, right? Who had been a head coach in BC for many years. But he swallowed his pride, and that's the guy who mentored Chris Jones, became that DC, and then was able to go on to Toronto and other teams as the head coach, Montreal, Baltimore.
I think Jones is just so stubborn that he'll want to do it again just to try to make everyone seem like he didn't get the right shot here or something. I just feel
Prove him wrong.
Yeah.
I think the Ticats are going to be looking for a DC soon.
Yeah, absolutely. But is this the guy you want? Well, I guess we'll see.
Hervey and Jones reuniting in the Hammer.
Oh, can you imagine? Yeah, actually, I can. I mean, we know he's not going to be in Edmonton anytime soon. We know he's not going to be in Saskatchewan anytime soon. But the rest of the league, who knows?
Yeah, and this really just feels like the beginning in Edmonton. I don't know if this goes away to I've seen fans in Edmonton say there's multiple themes. I'm not going to the games because of the name change. Yeah. But I do see people saying I'm not going to the games because of Chris Jones.
Yes.
I don't know if this will bring 4 or 5 of those people back, but this is not the end of changes in Edmonton, which is crazy because it seems like every week something else is going on. Like you think they've found the worst way to lose. They've found the worst.
Hold my beer.
When does it stop, Superfan? It's like we're on a toboggan going down Everest and it won't stop.
Yeah, just don't tell Andrew that one. It's I gotta feel like we're rounding that corner now. I'm just not sure what we're going to do for fixing some of those things on special teams, on defense, without changing a lot of personnel. Like, we're not going to be changing any schemes. We have the same OC, the same DC, the same special teams coordinator. So is it people just need to execute better? And if so, how is that going to happen? Because we have the same people.
Man,
you gotta make a statement. You gotta cut a big player. You gotta show the room that things are different. Hopefully Jerry is, first time interim head coach. We'll see what he could do. Bob Dice, took the reins in Saskatchewan as interim, and then he turned it into Ottawa, right? So
right.
Who knows? I hope for those Elks fans that something positive can come out of this.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Superfan Mike of the Turf District podcast, thanks for coming on the show with like 15 minutes notice. We appreciate it. And hopefully, I don't know, something positive comes your way.
Yeah, thanks, man. We'll see you in the stands in a couple of weeks for sure. And we'll have a beverage and talk about maybe a win the week before.
It could be a toilet bowl.
It could be.
Thanks, Superfan.
You betcha. Thanks, guys.
Thanks to Superfan Mike of the Turf District podcast for hopping on to an emergency appearance to talk about what's gone down in Edmonton with Chris Jones being relieved of his duties as GM and head coach. We started talking about week 6 sort of in reverse, so let's continue talking about it in reverse. The Saturday night game had the BC Lions beating the Saskatchewan Roughriders 35-22. Now BC extended that lead to make it 35 late in the game. It was 22-20 at one point, and I would say that the Riders had a pretty good showing in BC Place, despite Vernon Adams Jr. throwing for 451 yards. The completion percentage, not the best for VA. There was 2 interceptions, big for the Rider defense. But Sheldon, what was big here for the Rider defense was the pressure they were able to generate on VA. They haven't been able to do that all season, and this was a big moment to make it happen.
Yeah, and remarkably, especially with Charbel DeBeer and Christian Albright not available. So I was really impressed by that. Like you said, VA went off, but man, if Hollins would have kept or would have caught a couple of those, like he would have been close to like Matt Dunnigan's record, maybe. Like it was crazy.
You're right. He would have been at like 550.
Yeah, but like honestly, like I really wasn't upset about the way the Riders played. Their defense is typically a bend but don't break. At least it has been this season. And when you can hold them to like 7 field goals is a lot. I guess it works out to 3 touchdowns if you think of it that way. But honestly, like I came out of that game feeling like the Riders are still okay. They're still a pretty good team. I think they can match up well. And if they have Trevor Harris back in there when the next time they play BC, maybe it goes a different way. But the main thing that I'm worried about is, losing Jamarcus Hardrick. Like that was just a terrible play for Riders because, Jarrett Stearns lost the ball in the sun or something, and he would have walked in for a touchdown, and, you lose Jamarcus Hardrick on the same play. That's a tough pill to swallow for Rider fans like me. But again, a positive. I think they're still on track for next week. We'll see what happens against Winnipeg, but they had opportunities. If Shea Patterson could get into the end zone there, if those 2 big catches and runs that Emilus had, if he could have got into the end zone, just their red zone scoring was just tough. I'll say tough, but credit to BC's defense for locking down. Lowther getting that onside kick, that was incredible. But they did nothing after that. They gave it away. It was kind of the game you expect from the 2 best teams in the West to duke it out, right?
Sam Emilus, probably the game of his career, 8 catches, 161 yards, and AJ Ouellette, probably his best game as a Rider, 6 yards a carry, 72 yards on the ground, including 2 rushing touchdowns. It was that 27-yard run that was massive for him. But you mentioned the injury to right tackle Jamarcus Hardrick. If that's long-term, that is going to be, I think, a pretty big issue for the Riders in several ways. And then another one of their offensive linemen, Reed, at the end of the game. I don't know if that's just a cramp or what was going on there. It seemed to be a lot of cramping issues in the CFL this week, including Justin McInnis, which...
Unreal.
Okay. 14 catches on 14 targets for the BC Lions. 243 yards and a touchdown. Justin McInnis is on fire.
And Roland Milligan was actually covering him pretty well the entire game too. He just was going over top of him with those giant ass arms he has and pulling that ball down. Like it was incredible. Like and sorry, I was listening to the post-game show, the call-in show, and all the there's fans saying how terrible of a GM Jeremy O'Day is for letting McInnis go. Of course. Like McInnis has gotten more yards in the past 3 games than he had as a career as a Rider. So get out of here. The kid got good. He realized that he needed to take things more seriously. He got in the weight room. He's jacked now. And he's got Vernon Adams throwing to him. Calm down.
He was fired up to do it against his old team. You could tell. But so this week alone, there were 2 200-yard games. One from Justin McInnis and then one from Ontario Wilson of the Bombers. Alex Hollins had a 200-yard game this year. 3 this season, where I don't think there was a 200-yard game for about 5 years before this. The receivers are flying high in the CFL in 2024.
Well, honestly, and it's quite interesting because a lot of the running backs are having a tough time.
Yeah.
like the passing yards have been insane this entire season, and like I think the leading rusher is it still Rock Armstead? I'm not even sure. I haven't looked, but like I think the leading rusher has less than 500 yards.
Wow.
And like I think it's just like AJ Ouellette, everyone in Rider Nation is saying how much of a disappointment he is because he's not getting that many yards. He's still fifth in the league in rushing, or fourth, like fifth or fourth. Like,
guess who the leading receiver is? I mean, rusher.
Well,
yardage wise. I don't think you're going to get it. I don't think
430?
No, it's under 375 yards.
369.
No, well, it's 366. On 68 carries, it's Brady Oliveira.
Okay, yeah. Like, that came out of nowhere, right? Like, he's had two good games, and now, like, so that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of people are casting stones at these running backs. Like, Kevin Brown, he hasn't had a good year when he had a great year. But I just think that something's happening schematically that maybe the defensive coordinators are just going after the run more, stacking the box more, because we've seen teams be able just to throw over top of it and getting these insane receiving yards.
Yeah, it's definitely a trend because I'm looking between first and sixth in the CFL in rushing, 65 yards separates those backs. Dedrick Mills is getting 5.7 yards a carry. Now he has the best yards per carry average among running backs that get, carries here. But because Rock Armstead did have the tough average against Edmonton, so that definitely brings him down there. But Kadeem Carey, number 2, he's only 3 yards behind Brady Oliveira, 363 yards rushing. And then you got Stanback at 325, Mills and Armstead tied at 315, and Ouellette at 301. So...
Now that I think about it, I would have probably thought that Mills would have been up there because he
missed the game.
He missed the game, right? Yeah. But it's actually like I love the excitement of all these crazy passing yards, but I'm a run guy. I love seeing the teams pound the ball. So it's been a weird year for me, but it's been exciting seeing these receivers go off too.
It's an interesting trend, man. There's crazy stuff going on right now. It's definitely the schemes, and I think as far as defenses go, we've seen teams, especially when it comes to building a game day roster, favoring D linemen and linebackers. Right. And if they're gonna pass over those guys, there are some great pass covering linebackers and athletes in the CFL, but with the big field and if they can keep the quarterback protected, you're just not going to be able to cover a receiver that long, and BC's got that luxury. Vernon Adams Jr. is able to make time himself. He had 39 yards rushing, including a key rushing touchdown himself. But like if McInnes is going to be given the space because Alexander Hollins is drawing the top cover guys. Like Hollins and Adams weren't really on sync. A lot of it is on Hollins in this one. There was a wide open touchdown he should have had. The other one was a bit tougher to make, but we've seen him make those catches. 5 catches on 14 targets for Hollins. So if he caught at least 2 of those, maybe the Lions do run away from this one. But I think it was that fourth quarter from the Riders that was so surprising. They get stuffed on the goal line, but 2 plays later, they pick VA off. And they do score a touchdown and then recover the onside kick. That was a crazy sequence in this game. Lothar is the best in the league at doing that. No doubt. He might be the only one in the league that does it.
Yeah, Jeshua Nante's got the dribble kick.
Yeah.
And Lowther's got his little dribble onside kick there.
But it was after that, like the Riders I don't know if that woke up BC or what happened there.
Well, they fumbled. They fumbled after they got all that momentum. So, like, you give the momentum back to BC. They did have a good crowd because I'm not going to lie, because the Riders were in town, but they were able to open the upper deck, so that's great for BC. But when the opposing team has that momentum and then you can't capitalize on it, then it just goes all back to the home team.
You're right. Lothar recovers the onside kick. They hit Schaefer Baker for 20 yards. Patterson gets sacked, and then the completion to Emelis, and they fumble the ball. And then BC, for their part, capitalized on that turnover and scored that touchdown. VA with the 12-yard run to end that drive. And that's what the good teams do. When they take the ball away, when they gain an extra possession, they make the opponent pay. Because that is when the score starts to lean in your way. And credit to the BC Lions, that's what they did. Vernon Adams Jr. has shown me this year that, well, first of all, he's not throwing that many interceptions. He had 2 in this one, but it looks to me like he's got a very short memory and he's able to let those go. You know, and that's got to be hard I dwell on things. Like if I drop, like I did it last week, I dropped an egg when I'm ready to make breakfast on the floor. I was mad about that for 3 hours. You can't do that in a football game.
No, and Vernon Adams is the MOP right now. There's no question. A lot of people were saying earlier that Cody might have a run for it too, but no, Vernon Adams is running away with it. So knock on wood he can stay healthy, and knock on wood he can keep this up, because, you know, and I was texting you this like the other day, but as a Rider fan, obviously I want the Riders to win, but right now I kind of want Vernon Adams to win a Grey Cup. He deserves it. He just really deserves it.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of VA after, you know, and this is the thing we see with the CFL. A lot of times it takes these quarterbacks a long time to settle down. Now, we as fans and sometimes as front offices do not have patience. Now, there's a fine line between too much patience, like maybe what Edmonton did with Taylor Cornelius. But how long did it take for Anthony Calvillo to get settled in? Like, I think we were one interception from him never playing in the CFL again, and then all of a sudden you see what happens. I don't know, maybe it was the Nathan Rourke magic in BC. He was visiting.
So that, okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was really interesting, because Nathan Rourke was talking like if he ever did come back, that he was coming back to BC.
know, I agree.
And I'm like, maybe they don't want you anymore because Vernon Adams is going off. But if Nathan Rourke is going back to BC, BA, you look good in green again, buddy. That's all I'm going to say.
The campaign has started.
Hey, it worked for AJ. It worked.
So they were giving away free haircuts outside the stadium. The Olette, the Mackie, there were a few other options. I don't know if they were bleaching the...
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
So, are you still growing that mullet? Or did you break your... Okay.
No, it's still there. It's still coming, but it's getting annoying. I'm just going to say that.
Well, when it's 35 degrees and your neck is covered in that hair, like that's a struggle. Would you ever bleach it blonde? Like if the Riders are in the Grey Cup?
Yes, if the Riders are in the Grey Cup, I will.
If you had a blonde hair and a ginger beard, you would be the king of the 111th Grey Cup.
You would have to run that by my wife first, I think.
I think she'd be all right with it.
I think so too.
William Stanback couldn't get anything going on the ground in this one. 1.2 yards a carry, 12 carries for 14 yards. The injuries on the Sask D line, I guess maybe that helped them find their combination, because it was crazy what they pulled off in this one. They sacked Vernon Adams 4 times. I mean, again, these receivers are hard to cover. And if Vernon Adams can make any sort of time and find any sort of window to throw the ball, he's dialed in, and that's why he was able to throw for 451 yards on 26 completions. Shea Patterson, again, I think weathered an early storm because there was that early interception, and he could have fallen apart, but he didn't. 17 to 25, 278 yards and an interception. But yeah, the turnovers, the onside kicks that the Rider defense was able to force kept them in this game until the fourth quarter when the Lions pulled away at the very end. We already talked about Ottawa, Edmonton. We'll talk about Calgary, Winnipeg. I thought these Bombers were going to play bully ball, man, and I guess they kind of did, but 41-37, and they had to come back to beat Calgary. Calgary should be 2-0 against the Bombers, but the fact is they're not. This was a crazy game from start to finish.
It was. Like, at some points, it seemed like neither team wanted to win. At other points, it seemed like they were going to dominate the other team. Like, they were going, like, they were following each other, like, field goal, interception, touchdown. Like, it was, and they ended the second half with them tied, or the first half with them tied. So I just don't know if these were two teams that are becoming good and they were playing good against each other, or if they're still just two, not great teams playing well against each other. I just don't know. But, Zach finally got that monkey off his back. And for Bomber fans, I think you really got to be impressed by Ontario.
Wilson.
Wilson. Yeah. Because he had a great game. That touchdown catch when the defender was all draped over him and got the call. Yeah. Lots of really good catches this weekend, actually.
13 catches, 201 yards, and a touchdown on 16 targets for him. Like, he's definitely the guy that number one guy in that Bomber offense right now, behind Oliveira, obviously.
Yeah, and next week they're probably going to have Lucky Whitehead in there too, maybe, if he's ready to go. And let's face it, the Riders have been giving up lots of yards in the air. So, that's going to be quite the test for the Riders defense because they play Winnipeg next week.
That is going to be a fascinating game. We're going to see what both teams are made of. Normally, these teams don't play before Labor Day, but they are on Friday Night Football. The atmosphere in Regina should be good for this game. Now, there was a bizarre moment. This was in the second quarter when Claris he makes a completion to Nick Dembski for a 2-yard loss. Like,
well, it was called an incompletion.
Yeah. So it was called an incompletion, and Dembski kept running, right? Am I right on that?
Yeah, and he kept running. He got hit, but he would have probably got like an 8-yard gain.
He would have had a nice gain.
Yeah.
But the fact where the whistle was blown because it was an incomplete pass, you can't guess where the guy would have been tackled. So Mike O'Shea challenges this thing, and instead of being 2nd and 10, he won the challenge, but lost 2 yards, 2nd and 12. Now, it ends up being inconsequential, I guess, because the next pass was a 14-yard gain to Nick Dembski for the first down, and the drive ended in a field goal to make it 10-9 Calgary at that point. That was just a bizarre... I don't know if I've ever seen that in a football game, winning a challenge to lose 2 yards.
Oh, and I was sitting in my basement, and I was just busting a gut laughing because I knew that the whistle had gone, so there was no way they were gonna advance the ball anymore. And I was just like, "What are you doing, bud?" Like, because imagine, like, I know he had another challenge later in the game for incidental pass interference, which he got, but then you only get 2 challenges. So if later on in the game something would have happened that he needed that that second challenge, he wouldn't have had it on just a nothing play.
Yeah. This game was crazy because Calgary actually starts off with a touchdown drive, and they got off to such a fast start, and then the very next play or the next drive, Trey Roberson picks off Zach Collaros. Roberson probably had his best game, I think, in a couple of years as a Stampeder. So Calgary has the ball basically at midfield. They've got all the opportunity in the world to get a 2-score lead here. Well, Tyrell Ford with an interception. Jake Maier. Like, this game had play after play after play going on. There was a moment in the, I think it was the second half, where the center for Calgary ends up having a bad snap, ends up basically rolling the ball to Jake Maier. He hands it off to Dedrick Mills, who ends up having a 53-yard gain. Like,
it was bizarre. and Dave Dickinson, I know you listen. I know you listen. You gotta stop calling deep passes for Jake Maier. He's so inaccurate on these deep balls, but he's actually really accurate on the short and medium routes. So, as a Rider fan, keep calling the deep balls, but for your own sake, just use the short routes, because their receivers are fast enough to get some extra yards. I feel like you said, Calgary should have ran away with this game, I think, but too many costly overthrows and underthrows on the deep balls.
Yeah, so at the moment when it was like 10-9, Calgary answers back with the field goal, and then that crazy touchdown catch by Ontario Wilson, and then Jake Maier gets intercepted by Dedrick Nichols, which ends up putting Winnipeg into the lead, 22-13, 23-13 at that point. And then Calgary fights back. They kind of went on a bit of a roll here, and they ended up going kind of points for points, touchdown for touchdown, field goal for field goal at that point, until they ended up taking a 36-33 lead in the fourth quarter. And then, Calgary or Winnipeg does what they do and end up, winning the game 41-37. Like, I don't know, the way these teams are matched up, I think they just put good games on the field. I guess the last one was a bit of a struggle, even though it went to overtime. But there were plays made in this one and mistakes made, which I think just made for an entertaining Friday night football game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As a Rider fan, you're just sitting there and you're watching all these mistakes and you're just laughing about it. And best case scenarios, it would have been a tie. But saying that, it was a very entertaining game. Like, you had everything. You had big plays. You had terrible decisions. You had interceptions. You had fumble. Like, it was. This week was a very exciting week of football. Every game was just an awesome game.
Zach Collaros did have the 2 interceptions. I believe they both went to Trey Roberson. 2 touchdown passes, his first of the season. Brady Oliveira, 7.3 yards a carry, 15 carries for 109 yards. Dedrick Mills for Calgary, 8.7 yards a carry, 15 carries for 131 yards. Their leading receiver was actually the Canadian Clark Barnes, 5 catches for 80 yards. Other than that, Calgary actually spread the ball around quite well. I mean, there was a pretty critical fumble from Peyton Logan there. That was a big moment in this game that Calgary lost that one. But he had a catch. Dedrick Mills did. Mark and Michelle had 4. Bagleton had 3. Philpott, Jalen Philpott had a big 53-yarder in this one. Eric Brooks, a touchdown catch for the Stampeders, and Cole Tucker had a few. The Bombers, Dembski had 7. He did have a touchdown. He had 60 yards. Ontario Wilson, what else can you say about him? Wolotarski had 5 catches, and then Kevin Sklercius and Josh Johnson each had a catch in this one, but plays were made as the Bombers end up winning this one over Calgary. And another big one, Sheldon, is the Argos beating the Alouettes. And this is where I mentioned earlier, predicting the CFL is crazy. It looked like the Argos were reeling. 5 turnovers from Cameron Dukes in the past couple games. And going against the Montreal team that had looked like a powerhouse to this point in the season in Montreal. And there is, of course, a critical reason, I think, maybe why the Argos were able to pull away so much. But a 37-18 for the Argos. Guys get hurt. That's the name of the game. You just got to make it happen here. But when your team's first touchdown is from the defense, and then your special teams also scores a touchdown, you're going to have a good path to victory in the CFL, Sheldon.
Yeah, but in saying that, the rest of, offensively, they weren't spectacular.
No.
So Montreal's defense did still hold them, but when you do have 2, special teams and a defensive touchdown, you're not going to lose very many games if that happens. But for Montreal, when Cody did get hurt and Caleb Evans came in there, I thought the first drive that Caleb did, he did okay. But then after that, it's kind of like the wheels fell off and he didn't know what he was doing. So hopefully for Alouette fans and just fans of the CFL, Cody's okay. It looked like a hamstring. Hamstrings can be bad or they can be not so bad. But when he hit it, he heard it, you could see, and he ran right off the field, right into the tunnel, and it was definitely in some discomfort there. So luckily for them, they're on the bye this week, and but unlucky for us, I guess we won't really know what's going on for another week here. So,
yeah.
But hopefully it's not too severe and he can get back out there soon, because luckily they started out as well as they did. But if he's out for a significant time, then Toronto and Ottawa, actually, the path is there, right?
Well, when Cody got hurt, and I think some of the things that he does well kind of get taken for granted. I think the Owls do so many things so well that are little things that it just looks easy. But Caleb Evans got picked off on a screen. and the way that Fajardo runs the screens, and the Alouettes are so good at that, when it all goes wrong, you go, oh, that's what the starting quarterback is good at with the Alouettes. And to McManus's credit, he kind of read it like a book, and I think it was a bad throw on that. And hey, Evans, too, he made a crazy touchdown pass later in the game. Was it the one to Charleston Rambo? I think it was. He just got smashed and delivered the ball into the end zone and got that nice touchdown there. But again, it's just the little things that Fajardo does, and those little screens, Yeah,
well, and even downfield, Cody's probably one of the better deep ball throwers, right? So, but also, they've been having a lot of success with Tyson Philpott and getting his yak yards, having him come across the middle and going there. So hopefully if it is still Caleb Evans, they can work on that short game passing, because, he's still a dynamite receiver, and he's still one of the best in the league. And actually, was something I wanted to talk about that I forgot about. We have the leading receiver and the leading running back are both Canadians. That's pretty cool for the CFL.
That is pretty darn cool for the CFL. Now, hey, I think maybe another key thing in this game. Now, Jose Maltos is the kicker again for the Alouettes. He missed his first kick. So that is obviously a tough one. And then during warm-up, Keon Julian Grant ended up getting hurt. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this, Sheldon, because my fantasy lineup didn't save. So I had McLeod Bethel Thompson, and I'm in the stands, and I load up my fantasy roster, and I don't have him. I think the auto roster gave me Bo Levi Mitchell of the Ticats, who was on bye. I had my roster written down. McLeod, Brady Oliveira, Walter Fletcher, Curly Gittins Jr., Alexander Hollins, the Elks defense. Apparently the Elks defense saved. Oh, thank you for saving the defense. And Keon Julian Grant. Like, I don't understand how I can have my roster written down but not have it on the site. Anyway, I was rattled because Keon Julian Grant ends up getting hurt in warm-up. And he is such a good blocker on the Elks. But hey, thank you, for the Alouettes. Thank you for that 25 points, the auto roster that the Game Zone site built for me. Anyway, you can...
Hey, if I wouldn't have had Justin McInnes in my roster, I would have had like 40 points. I had Cody. Steaming. Cody was my captain.
Oh.
And I had Jarrett Stearns, who only had 2.9 points. Yeah, mistakes were made this week / unlucky. But that's funny.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was steaming in the stands. Like, I was so
I can
mad.
Imagine.
But like, I have my roster written down, so I just don't understand. Like, I don't just have their salaries in my head. I don't understand how I didn't click save or whatever happened.
I mean, how many times have you forgot to hit record? So
normally I roast you, so I appreciate that.
I get one.
I'm recording.
Superfan would have been rattled.
No doubt. Hey, credit to the Argos though. Like I said, a defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown. Like Janarian Grant,
he's money.
Is he underrated though? Like, I actually think he might be, and he's finally maybe starting to get the respect that he deserves.
Well, I think he had so much of his success just playing the Riders in Mosaic Stadium in previous, so maybe that's why he's a little bit underrated. But he's dynamic. He's fast. He's what Javon Leake was last year, and that what Edmonton was hoping he was going to be this year. That's and for Winnipeg, for them to not re-sign him, like,
that looks bad now.
For sure. And I think I remember seeing his salary isn't even that good. So, like, wow. Very interesting. But again, full marks to him, and he's the best one in the league right now, for sure.
Now, Janarian Grant has 10 kick return touchdowns in 46 career regular season games. There's only five guys ahead of him. Gizmo, Bashir Livingston, Brandon Banks, Keith Stokes, and Earl Winfield. And Stokes has 12 kick returns in 88 games. So if Janarian Grant gets 2 in the next 40 games that he plays, he's right up into that, tier. Gizmo Williams had 31 in 200 games. He might have more touchdowns called back than he actually scored.
Yeah.
But Janarian Grant among the greats, man.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And this season I think he's had 1 or 2 called back too. Or maybe not touchdowns,
big
but
ones anyway.
Really big ones, yeah. And so him, I know Alfred has a pretty good average too.
Mm-hmm.
He's leading the Riders. He's the Riders all time, and he's only played for the Riders for 3 seasons. So we're in the, I think back in the day we thought that was the cream of the crop of the return game with Gizmo and all that, but maybe now it is and which is actually really surprising just because of how much they're cracking down and how it seems every second return has a holding penalty or something stupid. So it's pretty impressive.
And the return game is something that I think we should cherish, because I'm
100%.
I'm afraid that I am afraid it's going to be lost. I understand it'll be for player safety, but I don't want... I think it's one of the most exciting things we can see. Cameron Dukes, like, it was a classic, I'm going to say it again, Matt Nichols game. 16 of 20 and a touchdown, 131 yards. So the Argos' leading receiver was Richie Sindani, who had 2 catches for 36 yards.
I know. That's why I like when I read the stats there, I wanted to make sure that we pointed out that their offense was not the reason that they won this game. But they don't ask you how; they ask you how many.
Yeah, and it's a 3-phase game, so that's a big part of it. And look, the Argos, they have several running backs or guys that have the ability to run, that they just throw it at you. Kadeem Carey had 94 yards, 5.9 yards a carry. Deontay McMahon had 14 yards rushing. He also added 19 yards receiving. And Daniel Adeboboye had 29 yards rushing, while Cameron Dukes had 46 yards rushing. So it just goes to show, with the commitment and the right schemes and the right offensive line, those Argos can run the ball at anybody, really. Any defense. They're a force to be reckoned with that ground game, man. They had the ball for the time of possession, 37 and a half minutes in this one. They controlled the clock.
See, okay, that's crazy. I didn't see that stat. So you have to give full marks to the offense if they had the ball that long. And even more impressive because they got 14 points out of, bang bang plays. So
yeah.
Okay, I take it back. The offense did their job. Cameron Dukes did his job.
As for the Alouettes, Cole Speaker was the leading receiver, 6 catches and 70 yards. And Tyson Philpott, he only had 38 yards, but he added a touchdown. And Charleston Rambo had 53 yards and a touchdown as well. Now, to wrap up the show, let's talk about finally, to end it, your CFL power rankings after week 6 of play. 6 teams moving positions, which has been different compared to the past couple weeks.
And I said that. Yeah, I said last week that there would probably be a lot of moving this week. So BC, they jumped up to first. They knocked Montreal off their perch, and that may be controversial, but I think it's just the way that BC is winning their games with just the dominating offense. I think that just shows how powerful they are. And then with Montreal possibly losing Cody, that takes away some of their power, right? But Montreal still in second. Going into the bye, they'll stay second next week, I'm sure. Saskatchewan, I moved them down to 3. They still, I think, looked good in the defeat, but they did still lose, so they had to go down. Toronto stayed the same at 4. I know they got a win, but again, it was against a team that lost their quarterback, and we just covered all of that. Winnipeg, they went from 8 to 5, so that was the biggest jump. And they won 2 games in a row, and but I just don't know if they're really that great yet. So we'll have to see this week against Saskatchewan. Ottawa stays at 6. I know they beat Edmonton, but who hasn't? That's all I can say about that. And then Calgary, they slid from 5 to 7. They've lost 2 in a row, so that's not very powerful. And then, like I said before, they have the potential. Jake Mayer is improved on some of his game. He just needs to either stop doing the other part or get better at that part. And then, we have a couple of other teams, and I'm trying to think of something funny to say about teams that I can put above them, but Edmonton is still 8 just because Hamilton was on the bye. But the collective wins there is just what it is. So
I've seen some people say that now that Chris Jones is gone, the Elks maybe fire up the power rankings to maybe number 4 or something like that.
We'll see.
Week 6 of the CFL season is in the books. It was an interesting week. I saw the commish was in Edmonton as well. I don't know if that means anything regarding a sale of the team, but they are going to be in Ottawa on Friday. It's actually a Friday night doubleheader. The games are probably going to overlap a little bit here. The Riders and Bombers play 2.5 hours after Ottawa and Edmonton, and then Saturday it's like a Labor Day weekend, man. The Ticats are hosting the Argos, and then the Stamps hosting the Lions on Sunday. It's going to be Wally Buono night at McMahon Stadium. That's week 6 of CFL football. You can subscribe to Two and Out on YouTube. The comment section has been fired up over the past few weeks. Let us know what you think about the Chris Jones news. Where do you think the Elks go from here? Is Chris Jones going to be back in the CFL? You can rate, review, and subscribe to Two and Out on your favorite podcatcher as well, and you can support the show on Patreon. I'm Travis Currah. Thanks to Superfan Mike of the Turf District for joining the show. That's Sheldon Jones. We will talk to you later this week to get you ready for Week 7.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.